right, Simon. So thank you so much for being here with us one more time for a CME.
Pleasure.
This time in St. Lucia. So you're a man that needs no introduction, but because our audience is large and varied, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what drew you into the world of diving and then in research, in medicine, and to become Simon Mitchell?
Okay. Well, I was very lucky. I grew up in a seaside suburb in Wellington in New Zealand, and diving was just what the kids did after school and actually sometimes during school. We were supposed to be at school. And I just fell in love with it. I just, found the underwater world was a fascinating place. And virtually from that moment in childhood onwards, all of my decisions about recreational activities and career decisions were influenced in some way by diving. So when I left school, I did marine biology first, worked in that field for about 6 or 7 years. And I figured out that in New Zealand anyway, people don't pay you to study the biology of fish. They just want to know how many fish they can catch. So that didn't really interest me that much. And I went to med school. And then after med school, joined the Navy to do diving medicine because that was kind of the only place you can learn diving medicine. After that, I worked in hyperbaric medicine. So if you try and make a career out of diving medicine, you inevitably get drawn into the sort of wider field of hyperbaric medicine because no one can make a career out of diving medicine alone. There's just not enough sick divers. Few people have tried, and I'm one of them, but you inevitably end up in hyperbaric medicine, so using recompression chambers to treat other diseases. And I did that for about full-time for about 5 or 6 years and realised that it wasn't going to be quite enough for me for the rest of my medical career. So that's when I became an anaesthesiologist. So I went back and trained in that. And now I'm an anaesthesiologist, a diving physician, and a researcher. The research thing started back in the Navy. The Navy paid me I was very lucky, they paid me to do a PhD, which got me started on that academic pathway. And so I've been able to apply the skills that I learned during that to continue a research career in basically diving medicine. Even though I'm professor of anesthesiology at the medical school, my main academic activity, as you know, is in diving medicine. And it's fabulous. I spend 3 days a week in the operating room, 2 days a week teaching, research, diving stuff mainly. I still do on-call for diving medical emergencies in New Zealand, and together with my anesthesia, that's my clinical career, and then lots of diving related research. And I still dive. I mean, so I became a passionate technical diver after the Navy. It was, in the early 2000s, it was rebreathers and mixed gases, and now we use those techniques to explore shipwrecks, caves, and we've had a lot of fun with that kind of thing.
And what drew you into technical diving? Was it the science behind it, or was it an urge to explore?
It's all of those things, Matias. It's, that's one of the cool things about diving is that it has this academic side. And I think most divers who progress into a longish diving career become captivated by the fact that it's not just what you do when you're in the water, it's acquiring the knowledge to make your diving safer, to make it more efficient, to extend your capabilities. That requires knowledge. So that's part of diving. And then there's what you do in the water. So it was the knowledge and the capability of doing these dives, but then doing them themselves. So yes, I wanted to explore deep shipwrecks and go further and deeper and longer in caves. I think one of the key points I'd like to make is that those things are a tool to get you to places you otherwise couldn't go. I'm not some kind of depth snob or wreck snob or cave snob. I enjoy diving anywhere. And people are often quite apologetic when they meet me. They'll say things like, well, I'm just a scuba diver. And I say, no, there's no just a scuba diver. All this extra stuff I do is just a way of getting to places I otherwise couldn't go. It's not the end in itself. The rebreathers, the depth, the mixed gases, that just gets me to places that I want to see. But I'm very happy sticking a cylinder of air on my back and just like here in St. Lucia, going out and diving on a shallow coral reef. I love it. So it's all great. How did I intersect with Dan? If you want to know that story. In quite a big way.
It's a good one.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, so I've obviously known of Dan virtually from the start of my career. I mean, let me just say, and I'm not a Dan employee. I'm no financial interest in Dan, but any diver who doesn't support Dan is bonkers, because Dan is the one constant thread throughout the world that's promoting safety. I mean, all the individual training organisations do. It's true, but Dan. It has this commercial level activity that generates some funds, but they plough those funds back into research, and they're one of the only groups in the world that does that. And I just think that anyone who doesn't recognise that and support it is not really getting it. Also, the insurance side, travel anywhere in the world to dive. If you don't have Dan insurance, you're nuts. But look, my involvement with Dan, obviously. We had quite a lot of interface with John Littman in Dan's, what was called Dan Southeast Asia Pacific for many years, just supporting their activities, educational events, those kind of things. But my big involvement, of course, was way back in 2002 when Peter Bennett, the original president CEO of Dan, moved on. I allowed my CV to be put forward for that position, thinking, of course, that nothing would ever come of it. And to cut a long story short, I was actually offered the position. And, when you're an adult, you make choices in life that you never really know whether you've made the right one or not. Seems like that never happens when you're a child, but yes, definitely when you're an adult, you have things that you reflect on. And I'll never know whether it was the right thing or not, but I ended up not doing it. It was kind of a choice between my anaesthesia career and Dan, and I'd been putting so much effort into becoming an anaesthetist that I really felt that I needed to stick to that pathway. But man, it was a hard decision, and I nearly ended up in Durham. And look, I don't regret it. I often think about it, but I'm so thrilled to see Dan maintain its sort of vibrancy and the organisation that it is, serving divers all over the world. The mission, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, you turn out to have a fantastic career. It's easy to connect the dots backwards when you say, well, look where you're now. We don't know if you would have been the same Simon Mitchell you're now. How do you make that choice? But anyway, so it would have been great for us, but it's been great for you too.
No, incredibly fair comment, Matias. And that's kind of what I mean when you look back and you just never really know. But I think you're right. I've been able to serve the diving community in my way. I could have done that from within Dan perhaps, but doing it from the outside has worked.
And we have been using your generosity for a good number of years now with this course, and we're always very grateful every time you jump in.
That's very kind of you. Look, it's a symbiotic thing. We all want the same thing, right? We're all on the same side. We're all promoting the same ideals and goals, and actually, you help the diving academics of the world achieve that, and we try to help you, and it works well.
And every time we start a CME, you always start with very kind words that are actually, they move me a lot. Well, so what does this CME mean for you after we've been doing it since 1982, and you've been a present faculty for many, many iterations?
Yeah, of course, one of the problems with diving medicine as an educational goal is there is no diving medicine education. And if you ask any audience of doctors, can anyone put their hand up if they learned anything about diving medicine at medical school? Yeah. I've asked that question so many times and nobody puts their hand up. And that creates a massive problem. It's not uncommon for a sick diver to turn up at an emergency department knowing more about the disease they have than the doctor that's treating them. And you name me one other disease where that's true.
I see that on a daily basis.
You would see that on a daily basis. Exactly. So these CME events are an opportunity in some small way, but a significant way, to help with that problem. Where do doctors go to learn about diving medicine if it interests them? The answer is there's not many options. I think in most countries, the various diving medicine societies have small courses that doctors can do. The cool thing about Dan is Dan has international visibility. So if you're a doctor, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you think, where would I go to learn more about diving medicine? The first thing that's going to pop into your head is, well, surely Dan does this. And you get on the website and boom, there you are. You know, there are diving medicine courses. And so this is an opportunity for those of us passionate about this discipline to connect with our colleagues who want to learn more. And it is I won't say it's a unique opportunity because there are other courses, but it is one of a few opportunities that are out there. So I love that. And of course, you know, if you do the stuff like the research, what's the point of doing it if you're not going to talk about it and, you know, put it out there? We try to focus on things that are 1 degree of separation from practical relevance. And so, you know, I enjoy passing that on to my colleagues, and you provide that opportunity.
And it shows when one of the beautiful things about the CME is giving participants the opportunity to interact with faculty. And that, I think, is a huge value, and it's what draws people back to the course and keep coming, because we're nerding out about diving and diving medicine 24/7.
Yes, well, actually, you raise a very good point, Matias. You know, like some people, you could be cynical about the fact that there's half a day of lectures and then half a day of diving, and people would say, well, it's a tax-deductible diving holiday, but actually, the diving boat periods are, the education is ongoing.
Continuous,
all the time. And I mean, it's fabulous and exhausting for people like you and I, you know, because we're never really off duty. You're on those boats and there's always people wanting to ask a question, have something clarified. So the lectures, yeah, sure, 4 hours of lectures, but it doesn't really stop. You get on that boat, and between dives, everyone's chatting, asking questions, getting clarification on things. So I actually think the way it's structured, it makes it attractive to people, but equally the education virtually continues 24/7. I've been very lucky.
Now you've crafted your career
to some extent. Yeah, I'd love to pretend that it's a carefully strategized, you know, crafted thing, but it has fallen together well. And I must say, you know, if you said you could have it all again, what would you do differently? Probably nothing, to be honest. Yeah, it's interesting. Most of my medical colleagues are impatient. You know, like the junior residents doing anaesthesia, they just want to get on and become consultant doctors. And I often say to them, look, just take your time. And actually, if you find something that particularly interests you, like diving medicine, and there are a few, halfway through your residency, why don't you take a year out and do our local, you know, diploma qualification in diving medicine, like, and in the United States, it might be the American boards or something like that. Because having a slightly circuitous route like I've had, nothing wrong with it. Right. The trouble is when you're young, you're impatient, you just want to get on with everything. But when you're at my stage and you look back, you can honestly say, well, actually, those were all good things. It worked. Yeah, the time in the Navy, the time doing hyperbaric medicine, they were all good things. And they contributed to where I am now.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's hard to give a clear path for this, but I think one of the ways that you can make your best to make sure that things turn out the way you want is if you're driven by passion. And you're a good example of someone that is driven by passion. In my case,
you know. No, there's no question about that. I mean, the kind of falling in love with diving thing that happened very early on in my life has made it easy to make these decisions that are very diving oriented. And actually, diving's interesting. It's one of those things that does tend to generate passion in people. You become quite obsessed with it, and it's fascinating because when you boil it down, what a diving trip looks like, you actually spend very little time underwater, but there's all the rest of it, which is the knowledge acquisition, the socialization, the technical preparation that people who are clever at those kind of things really enjoy. It's a package. Diving is a big package. It's not just what you're doing when you're underwater. And a lot of people find all elements of it very appealing, and I'm one of them.
One of the things that always fascinates me is how you go to scientific meetings like UHMS, UBS, and of course everything is driven by hyperbaric medicine, clinical hyperbaric medicine, but for some reason I think the common denominator is most of these physicians, their passion seems to be in diving medicine, even though some of them don't have barely any type of medicine in the practice.
Yeah, I think it kind of takes me back to a comment I made earlier. A lot of people get into the field because of an interest in diving, but then they find themselves in a situation where to make their career work, they have to embrace that wider field of hyperbaric medicine. And there's lots of examples of people who've really thrived and been fabulous academics in that context. I mean, we're with Chris Logue this week. I'd say he's a perfect example of that. He's a diver. He enjoys his diving, but he's become a massive influential clinician in hyperbaric medicine. I didn't. I kind of started down that road, but then anesthesia came along and that sort of took me away from the hyperbaric medicine. But Chris is a great example of one of those people that, started diving, but became extremely influential in this wider field of hyperbaric medicine. And that happens to a lot of people. I actually think Lynn Weaver's the same. There's a few of them around the place that, were divers to start with, but then became hyperbaric physicians and very successful.
And speaking of influential people, who would you say has been your most influential, either mentor or colleague?
Wow. Well, one of those answers is really easy. Actually, two of them are really easy. The most early influential mentor was Des Gorman. So Des hasn't been around for a while in this, he hasn't had a presence in this field. Unfortunately, he's quite sick at the moment. But he taught me academia. He taught me how to write. And as an academic, that is one of the most critical skills that you can have, to be able to write scientific prose properly. Des taught me that. The most influential colleague that I've worked with is Mike Bennett. And tragically, he died 2 years ago, and I miss him terribly. He was a massive influence in the field, mainly on the hyperbaric side. And I was kind of like the yin and yang. I was the diving side. He was the hyperbaric side. But we had a fabulous collaboration, published a lot of stuff together. And he, more than anyone else in the world, and I can say this with no fear of contradiction, brought hyperbaric medicine into the evidence-based medicine age. And gave our field a credibility that it would never have had if he had not been part of it. He was a fabulous guy, and I can't overstate his importance to my career.
Yeah, I think he was our lighthouse for evidence-based medicine.
He was. Yes. Of course, on the diving side, my current very strong collaboration is with David Dillette. And David and I, David's a physiologist, works for NEDU. He's, I think I can say without fear of contradiction, that he's the world's leading decompression modeler. And we have another powerful collaboration because he's not a clinician, although he sees lots of decompression sickness and is test diving. But I provide the clinical component to our collaboration. He provides the physiology. He's a mathematical genius. I'm a mathematical imbecile, and so we work really well together. We've published a lot of stuff, and he's another terrific person, but massively valuable to the field in terms of fighting off the nutters and the people who will claim things without real knowledge. David's been a massive asset in pushing back on that over the years. I might say, actually, since we're rambling around a bit, that one of Dan's most important roles, in my view, and it's something that I've attempted to do at a personal level, is provide not just accurate information for doctors, but for divers themselves. They face exactly the same problem. Where do you go to get accurate, advanced knowledge? And look, I'm not being disrespectful to the diving training organisations. They actually do a pretty good job. You know, diving is a safe sport, but they provide a level of knowledge that they see as adequate. The people that become passionate want more.
Right.
Where do they go for that? They go to the internet. And, well...
Dr. Google.
Well, the internet is a mixed blessing. There is some fabulous stuff there, but there's also a lot of rubbish. And filtering that is difficult. And there are some people, and I am one of them, who've given a lot of time to trying to push divers in the right direction to get accurate information. David Dulett is another one.
Yeah.
But that's a very important role for both people like me and Dan. And you know, Dan has done a terrific job. I mean, look at these little 5-minute podcast things that the Dan South African guys are doing at the moment. So really good, really good. Franz does a fabulous job with that. And, you know, there's huge value in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we actually included as part of our training for medics to review all those 5-minute factoids, they call them, great.
Yeah.
But so, what would you say has been the most groundbreaking research in the last, say, 5 or 10 years that has changed or has the potential to make diving safer or to have a better understanding of physiology? What has been the one thing that you say, wow, this is something?
Well, you know, it's difficult. You know, I certainly wouldn't be so arrogant as to nominate a piece of my own research, although I do think we've made some cool contributions. I think one of the things about diving medicine research is to understand that it's not well resourced. You know, no one has money to do massive studies in diving medicine, or it's very unusual. I mean, we have been extremely lucky and deeply grateful to receive research funding from the US Navy for, you know, the last 6 or 7 years. We're like so grateful. But even that, you know, we've put that towards relatively small, doable studies that have high practical relevance to the diving community. And that is one of the cool things about diving medicine research. There's still quite a few low-hanging fruit that, you know, you can do relatively small studies to answer important questions. And I talked about a couple of them this morning. Yep. You know, the study that looked at whether a 5-minute pre-breathe can really answer the question, is my scrubber working, before a rebreather diver jumps in the water. And we showed that it doesn't work. And if you think back to that, that's 10 years ago. That's the lead author on that study was one of my residents who is now a consultant anaesthetist. Her study that she did 10 years ago changed practice overnight all over the world. People stopped saying, oh, you can detect a CO2 problem with a 5-minute pre-breathe. That's real world impact for a resident research project. And there are numerous examples of that kind of thing in diving medicine. So I think diving medicine is really exciting from that perspective. If you're a young academic coming into the field, there are so many things that you can still do. Yeah. You know, and Dan helps with that. If you're asking me what I think in the last few years has been the most groundbreaking, impactful piece of research to come out in diving medicine, I would nominate David Dulett's paper from about a year ago, published in DHM, where he showed that a big database, so over 1,000 dives, the same diver doing the same dive multiple times. And by the same dive, I mean everything we think is important in decompression stress. Depth, time, workload, temperature, decompression profile, same. Multiple times, generate different bubble grades after each dive. Some divers, it's always the same. either no bubbles or lots of bubbles, but there's this massive group of divers in the middle that they do exactly the same dive, and one day it's 0 bubbles, one day it's grade 4 bubbles, another day it's grade 2 bubbles. What's that all about? If we could answer that question, if we could answer that question and then manipulate whatever factor it is that is changing those bubble grades, there's the opportunity to make diving safer. And that's why I nominate that study as being so important, because it's opened up that question. What is it that makes these bubble grades so different? If we could figure that out and then manipulate it, there's a tool.
Yeah, that'll be groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And recently, over the past maybe 10 years or so, something new showed up, something new appeared, and people are still talking about it. Microparticles.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on the role of microparticles in pathogenesis of decompression sickness and as a...
So microparticles are little slivers of cell membranes from formed elements in blood. So they can arise from red cells, white cells, platelets, and the endothelial cells that line blood vessels. And in fact, you and I have got microparticles circulating in us right now. And they're not unique to decompression sickness, no way. They're part of lots of disease processes. In fact, in some disease problems like sepsis, really bad infections, microparticle numbers go sky high, way higher than in decompression sickness. And in fact, that forms another argument why it seems unlikely that microparticles are the full explanation for decompression sickness, because people who have those diseases, they don't get the symptoms of decompression sickness. They have other symptoms. But yeah, microparticles are part of normal physiology, and they are probably part of mediating all inflammatory processes that occur in the body. So there's nothing unique about them to decompression sickness. There may be some types of microparticles that are more important in decompression sickness than in others, because there's not just one type, but primarily they are an inflammatory mediator that is well known in multiple disease processes.
Right, they're not specific to decompression sickness.
No, they are not. Well, yes, microparticles have emerged as inflammatory mediators in decompression sickness. There has been an amazing body of what I would characterize as very high quality work that's come out of one lab in particular, Steve Thom, in the United States. And I have no doubt that microparticles are part of the inflammatory picture in decompression sickness. It also turns out that some of these microparticles form while you're at depth, and some of them contain small amounts of gas, and they actually may be precursors to decompression bubbles. So there's multiple levels at which microparticles might interface with decompression sickness pathophysiology. Now, with that said, like all new exciting things in any medical field, there has been a tendency to potentially overemphasize the role for microparticles, and there have even been some claims that, well, maybe decompression sickness is all about microparticles and not about bubbles. I would characterize that as easily provable nonsense. And that's no disrespect to Steve or the quality of work he's done. I think it's fabulous, and as I said before, but there are so many big picture reasons why microparticles can't be the whole thing. It can't be, decompression sickness can't be all about microparticles. For example, there are, 15 studies that link cerebral spinal inner ear and cutaneous decompression sickness with the presence of a patent foramen ovale. If microparticles were the big deal, a patent foramen ovale wouldn't matter.
Exactly.
Because a patent foramen ovale must let something get into the arterial circulation that the lungs normally filter out. And the lungs don't filter microparticles. So, that's just one example. There's also been this thing about, well, they form at depth, independent of bubble formation. But if if that was what was causing decompression sickness, why don't saturation divers get sick while they're still under saturation? There's a whole bunch of very big picture reasons why it can't be all about microparticles. But could microparticles be part of the reason bubbles form? Yes, absolutely. Could microparticles be part of the reason we have this inflammatory response to decompression sickness? Absolutely. So could they be an important part of the pathophysiology? Absolutely. But I don't think there's any question that they are the primary vector of injury.
Right. No, I think it's important to emphasize that because, sometimes we have access to internet and divers have access to internet, and those of us that are more interested in just blowing bubbles and we want to find more, sometimes we see at the end that, people have much more access to medical information than what they probably need and much more than what they can safely handle. Yeah. So I think it's important to put things in perspective that, yes, this is interesting, but, chances are this is not the culprit, right?
Well, I mean, another one of those big picture things is if it was all about microparticles and not bubbles, why would we even bother to decompress at all?
Exactly.
I mean, why don't you just come straight up? Oh, you formed too many bubbles. Well, of course, that's because bubbles are the primary vector of injury and decompression sickness. But look, it's a complex picture, and I just want to emphasize that Steve's work has been incredibly valuable, and he's a fastidious scientist, and it's all very well conducted. And I think that we've learned a lot from it, particularly this very complex pathophysiology, what happens after bubbles form, or part of that inflammatory milieu in decompression sickness. And he has helped untangle that. But I don't think there's any question that microparticles are the primary vector of injury. I don't think that's true. Right. The time when I encountered that sense relatively regularly is when I see a sick diver who's got this perplexing array of weird symptoms that are terrifying for them. And I can explain it to them in terms that they understand, because I know what is going on through all the work that collectively our field has done. When I think about this is why I do this, it's when I'm, it's about the patient, and I understand what's going on with them, and I can explain it to them. And I'm not guessing. I'm able to give them objective information because I understand the process. I understand the literature. I can give them good answers. And that is incredibly satisfying. And I would say that that's the situation that I would encounter most often, where I have that kind of emotion or sense that this is why I do this.
Well, now that you say that, I feel that we at Dan, we're incredibly lucky, because that's essentially what happens with us every time we pick up the phone, and they're calling because they have some symptoms and they don't know if this is dive related or not. And sometimes it's a pretty obvious answer as to what is going on. And when you can explain to them in simple terms, and we can see them, but we can feel, voice cues, and when they have this aha moment, when they say, okay, I get it. And we have seen this even this week with, people with ear issues. And again, they're not medical. So for us, this is bread and butter. This is what we do every day. But you explain to them what is going on, and I always tell the medics in the hotline, this is the best payback we have. That is what worms are hard to say. This is what we do this.
Yeah. Well, there it is. Yeah, exactly. Same thing. It's a great feeling to have a sense that you're on top of a disease process. You understand it well. You can explain it to the patient. You know exactly what to do, how to do it. And of course, that comes from a lifetime of study, experience, and research. And so that collectively brings this immense sense of satisfaction.
And you have a particular skill in making very complex things simple, which is why
it's very kind
so
of you.
Popular, and we love having you here.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, well, I try. And part of the reason I think I am good at that, Matias, is that I went through medical school trying to explain things to myself and learning to do that. I know that sounds kind of a bit ridiculous,
No.
but working through things in your own head explaining things to yourself in terms that you can understand and then recall when you have to spew it all out in an exam. That is something that I worked very hard at because 100%. I kind of felt I had to. And
100%.
Yeah.
And it's a way to study. I mean, there's a technique. You prepare a subject and then you present it to your mother, to your brother, to your co-worker, something. And if you can explain it and they can understand it, you have it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great way of consolidating. Teaching is a great way of consolidating your own knowledge.
So what recommendations would you have for someone that is new in diving and for someone that is interested in a career similar to what you have had?
Similar to mine. Yeah. Look, I actually get this asked. I get asked this a lot, Matias. You know, how do I become what you've done? And here's my answer. If you want to become, a clinical academic in diving medicine, you need to first understand that you are not going to be able to make a career out of diving medicine. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, right? Someone's just asked, how do I make a career in diving medicine? You can't. What you have to do is make a career that's compatible and has overlap with diving medicine. And there's a formula for that. So it would be you go to med school and then you pick a clinical discipline that has some overlap. Anesthesia is perfect because you learn the suite of skills that allows you to be calm in emergency situations. You know, if something goes wrong on a dive boat, you've got all the right knowledge and skills to deal with it. Similarly, emergency medicine, those kind of things. And that's the clinical training pathway you take. But at the same time, you look for opportunities to affiliate yourself with some kind of authoritative diving medicine group. So you would choose to do a fellowship at an institute that has a hyperbaric service and runs a 24-hour, diving emergency service. There are a bunch of places like that in Australia and New Zealand, same in the United States. So you need to be strategic. What I would not advise you to do is to try to go the whole diving medicine route, because what will happen is either you'll join the military, and certainly in a big military, you have no control over your life. They might send you somewhere that's great for diving medicine for a little while, but then you'll be off somewhere else and off somewhere else, and you can't control that. Or you'll get sucked into the wider field of hyperbaric medicine. And actually, if that interests you, that's fine. That's good. That would work. But you have to be sure that that's what you want, because hyperbaric medicine has a limited number of indications and activities, and so your clinical career is going to be quite narrowly focused. My advice for someone who wants diving medicine as part of their career is to do a compatible non-hyperbaric specialty like anesthesia, like emergency medicine, but associate themselves early as possible with a place where they do diving and hyperbaric medicine as well. And that works. And that's how most people do it. Even better if you can throw a little bit of research work in there. Get involved in some research projects. And we've already talked about how there are low-hanging fruit in our specialty. Find a mentor who knows about that, can identify things for you. I mean, I do that for people in my orbit, and there are lots of influential, Richard Moon, classic example, right? He has mentored so many anesthesia and emergency residents into research projects that kick off their career, and away they go. He probably more than anyone else in the world would lay claim to having done a huge amount of that stuff. And I try to as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that would be my advice.
And for general divers, for new people that may be watching us and, they're interested in diving, or they are divers and they want to be good divers, sound divers.
Well, the world of diving has changed a lot since we started. It used to be, when I was a diver, the goal for every serious diver was to become an instructor. That was it. Open water, advanced, rescue, dive master, instructor.
And then you have to, because there's nothing else, right?
There was nothing else. That's the point. Now, in order to advance your diving skills, knowledge and capability, you have this whole other pathway, which we call technical diving. And unless you want to teach and look after new people in the water, which is a very laudable goal and lots of people want to do it, I would not go down the instructor pathway. If what you're looking to do is enhance your diving capability, go down that other route. So nitrox, advanced nitrox, decompression procedures, and then your mixed gas qualifications. And that gives you true enhancement of your diving capability. I mean, again, I'm at great risk of sounding disrespectful to instructors. I'm an instructor. I'm not trying to sound disrespectful, but that does not enhance your diving capability. It's a whole different thing. It's teaching. It's a teaching career. Whereas the technical diving pathway takes you deeper, takes you longer, allows you to explore. And that's what a lot of people want. But in the old days, you couldn't get it.
Yeah, it exposes you to this new world, which is what is a driving passion for us, which is the sciences in diving.
Well, along that path are all those low-hanging fruit. That are great little research projects that answer questions of high practical relevance to the community, like that pre-breathe study. Something that influenced global practice overnight, a simple study done by an anesthesia resident. And there's plenty more since then. Yeah, that's a good example though.
Excellent. So Simon, thank you again for this one more time joining us at the CME. And it won't be the last.
No, I hope not.
No, of course not.
No, these are amazing opportunities. I'm very grateful for the invitation and thrilled to be here. And for all the reasons we've discussed, I think this sort of activity is incredibly important for the field. And so, glad to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.